20 years ago, the first China shock flooded global markets with low-cost consumer goods, driven by millions of workers in massive, labor-intensive garment and textile factories. Today, a second shock is underway. China's manufacturing sector has moved up the value chain, shifting its massive industrial capacity toward advanced green technologies. The first pillar of this new export wave is solar power. Chinese factories now produce roughly 86% of the world's solar modules. The second pillar is the automotive sector. Chinese manufacturers account for over 2/3 of global electric vehicle production. And the third pillar is energy storage, with assembly lines churning out 80% of the lithium-ion batteries that power those vehicles and store that solar energy. This massive output is the result of years of state-directed subsidies. The government incentivized companies to build out clean energy infrastructure so aggressively that the country's manufacturing capacity now far exceeds what its own citizens can actually buy. Inside China, this structural overcapacity has led to a phenomenon local economists call involution. Domestic companies are locked in brutal price wars that drive profit margins to near zero, forcing them to export their excess inventory at steep discounts just to survive. As these stockpiles grew, the domestic economic imbalance transformed into a massive, built-up supply of green technology, sitting in warehouses and ports, waiting for a catalyst to pull it into the global market. That catalyst arrived in early 2026. A geopolitical conflict in the Middle East led to the sudden closure of the Strait of Hormuz, stranding oil tankers and cutting off a significant portion of the world's traditional energy flows. The sudden drop in oil shipments sent immediate shocks through international markets. Countries reliant on imported fossil fuels faced an acute energy shortage. To keep power grids running and factories open, desperate governments rapidly accelerated their transition to renewable energy sources, seeking immediate alternatives to the missing hydrocarbons. This chart shows the exact moment the market reacted. In March 2026, corresponding directly with the oil crisis, Chinese clean tech export volumes spiked by roughly 70%. The sudden shortage of traditional energy perfectly aligned with China's oversupply of green technology. The domestic capacity problem became a global lifeline, releasing a flood of solar panels and batteries into energy-starved markets worldwide. To maintain this extreme level of industrial output, Chinese factory floors require vast, continuous energy inputs. With global maritime shipping routes suddenly compromised by the crisis in the Middle East, Beijing looked north to secure its resource supply lines, strengthening its economic ties with Russia. During Vladimir Putin's 25th trip to Beijing, the two nations solidified an arrangement of mutual benefit. Heavily sanctioned by Western nations over the war in Ukraine, Russia secured a reliable economic buyer, while China locked in the fuel required to keep its assembly lines moving. The physical mechanism for this resource exchange is the Power of Siberia pipeline network. This provides China with high-volume overland energy deliveries that are immune to naval blockades or disruptions in international waters. By pairing Russian resource extraction with Chinese industrial capacity, both nations formed an insulated economic axis. China can now manufacture and export its green technology flood with a continuous, secure energy supply that Western nations cannot easily disrupt. Meanwhile, lawmakers in the United States and the European Union recognize that accepting millions of heavily subsidized Chinese solar panels and vehicles would severely damage their own domestic manufacturing sectors. The European Union reacted by introducing aggressive trade barriers, ultimately voting to impose tariffs as high as 35.3% on imported Chinese electric vehicles. The United States took parallel defensive actions, utilizing broad Section 301 investigations targeting structural excess capacity and implementing their own series of protective trade walls. These steep tariffs successfully insulated Western factories from the immediate price shocks. However, they did not halt China's assembly lines, and the millions of surplus batteries and vehicles simply had to find a new path of least resistance. This map illustrates where those diverted goods are flowing. With the largest consumer markets heavily fortified, the Chinese export wave has been redirected south, pooling heavily into Southeast Asia and Latin America. Unlike the US and Europe, many emerging markets in the global south lack the economic leverage to impose massive tariffs without severe retaliation, leaving your domestic industries completely exposed to the influx of artificially cheap goods. The result is localized economic damage. In nations like Indonesia, the sudden arrival of underpriced foreign imports has triggered widespread factory closures and massive job losses across established manufacturing sectors. Many of these developing nations previously relied on integrating into global supply chains to build their economies. Now, as they are undercut by subsidized foreign imports, they face a rapid de-industrialization. China's massive overproduction is rapidly expanding the availability of affordable solar panels and electric vehicles globally. This green transition is splitting the global economy in two: nations with the wealth to build protective trade fortresses, and developing markets forced to absorb the collateral damage of the flood.